They say the water keeps its own memories. That lakes hold things a little longer than they should. But the stories from Deep Pine Lake don't feel like memories. They feel like warnings. Every person who has lived near that water agrees on one detail. There is someone out there. A man who stands in the shallows long after midnight. A man who shouldn't exist. A man who watches. And once you see him, the lake never lets you forget. The first sighting that made news happened only 3 years ago. A man named Chris Mendez was camping with 2 friends on the North Shore. The night was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that makes your breath sound too loud. The lake was perfectly still. Around 2 a.m., Chris stepped out of his tent to get some air. He said it felt like the darkness was heavier than usual, like the sky was sinking closer to the surface of the water. Then he saw movement. Slow, deliberate, human. At first, he thought it was someone fishing at night, but the figure didn't move like someone holding a rod or walking along the bank. It was standing in the lake, not on the shore, not knee-deep, waist-deep, completely motionless, facing him. Water rippled around the figure's torso, but the arms stayed perfectly still. Chris blinked, thinking his eyes were playing tricks, but the silhouette didn't fade. It sharpened, like someone adjusting their posture to get a better look at him. He tried to wake his friends, but by the time they came out of the tent, the figure was gone. No splash, no footsteps, no sound of movement, just empty water. Chris said the lake felt colder after that, like stepping into a room where someone had just been standing a moment earlier. He said the air tasted metallic. He said the silence felt wrong. A few weeks later, a fisherman on the opposite side of the lake reported something almost identical. Early morning, fog low on the water, the sound of his boat tapping against driftwood, and then, rising out of the mist, the outline of a man standing completely still in water far too deep for anyone to stand in. The fisherman said the figure didn't react to the boat, didn't turn, didn't move, just stood there. When he blinked, the figure vanished without sending a single ripple across the surface. Local authorities dismissed the sightings as shadows, illusions, tricks of the light. But people who live near Deep Pine Lake know the difference between shadows and a body. They know when something is watching them, and they know when something is waiting. The story becomes even stranger when you look back further. In the 1980s, a teenager named Mark Hollis went missing near that same lake. He had been swimming with friends when he suddenly swam toward a darker patch of water. They said he stopped, stood upright like he could somehow touch the bottom, and stared at something beneath the surface. They shouted for him to come back. Mark didn't respond. He just whispered something no one could hear. Then he was pulled under. The divers who searched for him said the lake floor dropped sharply at that spot, too sharply, as if carved out intentionally. Mark's jacket washed onto the shore 2 days later, folded neatly, dry, with no footprints around it. Years later, a hiker found something else, a camera near the lake's south trail. It was water damaged, but the last photo was still visible. It showed the shoreline, trees bending in the wind, the reflection of the water. And on the left side of the frame, almost hidden in the darkness, the shape of a man standing in the lake, his head tilted slightly toward the camera, his face too blurred to recognize, his body too solid to ignore. Experts said it was a smudge on the lens, but the silhouette was too precise, too human. The part that connects everything happened only last year. A woman named Dana lived in a cabin overlooking the lake. She liked to read by the window at night. One evening she noticed someone standing near the waterline. At first she thought it was a neighbor, but the figure didn't move. Not for minutes. Not even when the wind blew hard enough to shake the branches around him. Dana stepped closer to the glass. The figure slowly lifted its head, as if sensing her. She said she felt something cold brush the back of her neck at the same moment. She shut the curtains and didn't look again. The next morning she found wet footprints on her porch, perfectly shaped, bare feet, leading directly to her door, and stopping there. No return prints, no trail away, just a line of water leading to where she had been standing the night before. People in town say the lake has always had a presence, a guardian, a watcher, something that I send to human, but wears the shape of one because it knows we notice our own reflection before anything else. They say the man from the lake appears only to people who are going through something heavy, grief, fear, loneliness. They say he stands in the water because he isn't meant to leave it, but he can get close enough for you to feel him, close enough for you to hear the water drip from his hands, close enough for you to realize he doesn't blink. There is one last detail I haven't told you, a pattern in every sighting, a detail so small most people miss it. After each encounter, the witness describes the same final moment. Before the figure disappears, the lake goes silent. No wind, no insects, no movement, as if the entire world is holding its breath. And then, just before the figure sinks beneath the water, there is always a sound. A single soft splash, too gentle for a body, too deliberate for an animal. A sound that feels like a greeting or a promise. If you've ever stood near a lake at night and felt someone watching from the water's edge, if you've ever heard a splash when the surface was perfectly still, if you've ever sensed something rising from the dark to look back at you, stay. You're not alone. You are among your own.